Let me start by introducing her. For those of you that might not know her, I'll just read out her bio. Born in the natural state of Arkansas at age 18, Taylor packed up everything that she owned and never looked back. Dallas, Texas is where she currently resides with her husband and three little ones, three beautiful children. Life is fun. Her husband, Robert Madu, captured her heart from day one. Her greatest earthly reward has been wife to Robert and mother to Evie, Naj, and Remy. She says, my family means the world to me. They have exceeded every expectation. Never put limitations on what you think you deserve. God's grace gives us what we don't deserve. My family has been my ultimate dream come true. Her goal in life is simply to love God with all her heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love her neighbors as herself. She says it sums up who she is as a person. She loves people. She's intrigued by personal stories, and she wants to be friends with anyone and everyone because everybody has something special and unique to offer this world. She believes the stories of our lives were never meant to be kept a secret. She loves traveling and telling the world about Jesus, and today she's in Nigeria. Even if she's digital, she's still in Nigeria. She says Jesus saved her soul and she wants to change the world, whether it's on a platform of thousands or of one person that she meets at Starbucks. She desires for people to know that they matter and that they are not defined by their mistakes or failures. There is hope, there is life, there is a beautiful destiny waiting on the other side of your yes to Jesus Christ. You matter. And today we're going to be talking about identity, self-awareness, self-confidence, and just identity in Jesus Christ. So once again, thank you, Pastor Taylor.
Goodness, thank you. You're the best.
You
Seriously.
are amazing. So I'll just give you guys a little background. Um, like I said, Pastor Taylor Madu is married to Pastor Robert Madu. And a couple of weeks ago, I watched one of her messages on YouTube, a particular conference that she has spoken at, and I was absolutely blown away. I would allow her to tell her story, but her story is one, just like a bio says, of absolute redemption. She is a pastor's daughter, but unfortunately, life happened and her parents got divorced at the age of 7. Her mother got addicted to drugs and antidepressants. And then at age 17, Pastor Taylor gets pregnant. Obviously, even in this part of the world, you shouldn't get pregnant at 17 out of marriage. It's like the end of the world for anyone, coupled with the fact that she is a pastor's daughter. And so it's interesting to look at her life today, almost another 16 years later, and see how what could have been the end of her world has absolutely turned upside down. And, she's just shining for Jesus, which is why we just thought, you know what, let her come and talk about how she found her identity in Christ in the midst of all of these things that has happened in her life, and help some of us that may be struggling with identity. Who am I? Have made mistakes, have falling, have had failures. How is my life going to start again? So Pastor Taylor, I'm not the one for this session. You are the one for this session.
I love
I'll
it.
just
I love
allow
it.
you to share. Yes, and then we'll take questions and answers much later.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, it's the biggest honor and privilege to be able to be a part. It's not a big deal at all for me to wake up early. My kids usually wake me up early, anyways. And so to be able to get up this morning and share the gospel all the way in Nigeria, it is my honor and privilege. I don't take it lightly. As I mentioned before in the bio, that I believe we all have stories, and I believe that they're not God never intended for us to keep those to ourselves. That once you've come to healing, right? When we all carry scars, and where there's a scar, that means that healing has taken place. So I think now I'm able to fast forward 16 years later and share from a place of wholeness. But I wasn't always whole. I wasn't always strong. I wasn't always wise. I've made really bad decisions, but I think the grace of God has always pursued my life. And I think that's the beauty of serving Jesus and having people fighting for you, even when you're too weak to fight for yourself. I mean, fighting for you spiritually.
Pastor Taylor, can your volume be a little higher? People are saying your volume is slightly low,
I'm
just
not
a
sure.
little higher.
Maybe let me just talk louder. Maybe that'll help and I'll bring it closer. Can you hear me? Is that better?
Okay. Yes, it is.
Is that better?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Thank you.
So, with all of that being said, today I just want to give insight. As you mentioned, people see me now. You know, if you happen to know who I am, most people don't know who I am, but a lot of people, if you do know who I am, they see this side of who I am today. But most people don't realize what it took to get me where I am today. It was a big fight. It was a struggle. It wasn't always super easy for me. But I also believe that the enemy is not going to let us go down without a fight, right? We all have a call and purpose on our lives, and that's just who God is. When He created us and designed us, He created us with purpose and with destiny, and the enemy is not going to let us go down without a fight. And so I believe that's my story from a young age. I grew up in ministry. My father's been evangelizing now. What my husband does, my father has done for 37 years of my life. So I was born into ministry. We're from Arkansas, a small town in Arkansas. So everyone knows everyone. They knew that we were the family that loves Jesus. And as my dad traveled the world, and literally the world, he would hold revivals. So Sunday morning, Sunday night through Wednesday nights. He would come back on Thursday. So then dad would come home from saving the world on Thursdays. And we would be together Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday he was out again so he could make it Sunday morning. So it's all that I ever knew. And my mom was superwoman. She held it down at home. She was cooking and cleaning and mowing the yard and making sure we were in school, making sure we were in church, and all the things that mamas do. Shout out to all the mamas because it's a grind on its own, right? We have the Zoom call, so you know what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zoom call was crazy, right? My kids are crazy, but they're the best. So, anyways, at age 7, my mom sits me down and my brother, and she said she needed to talk to us to tell us something. And so, right about the time that we sit, the phone rings. She takes the phone call and she begins to say with someone, I haven't told him yet, but I'm about to tell him. So then me and my brother are contemplating what exactly she's about to tell us. And so we're sitting there. She gets off the phone. She comes and sits and tells us something that would completely change my life forever. And she starts it off by, your mom and dad, we love y'all so much. You're incredible children. There's nothing that you've done, but your father and I are getting a divorce. And so I was 7 at the time. My brother was 9. And my sister was 11. I'm the youngest of 3. My sister wasn't there though. But when she told us that they were getting a divorce, I knew it was bad, right? I never expected it because we were a family who served Jesus in ministry. I never even thought that was an option. But when she began to tell us that, dad wasn't coming home, I knew that divorce was bad. I just didn't know how bad it was until I had to walk that thing out. And so for us, it was very extremely dysfunctional. Life went from this picture perfect family to now all of a sudden chaos and extreme dysfunction. In order to see my mom, I would have to leave dad by himself. In order to see dad, I'd have to leave mom by herself. I would say that on a scale from 1 to 10, the divorce for us was very unhealthy. It would be a 10. We were like the ping pong balls almost. We were tossed back and forth to get back at the other parent, especially on my mom's side, honestly. Um, what did life look like for us from there? It was just very unhealthy, a lot of fighting. We would be in public spaces eating, at a restaurant, and all of a sudden cop cars would pull up and they would say, walk in, and the whole restaurant turns and looks, we're here to get the Mitchell kids, because my mom would send police cars to come pick us up because she was mad at my dad. And we would be in courtrooms testifying against, one parent. And so as a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old, and as I grew older, this was, really the years of development, right? And it was shaping in my mind the way I saw family, the way I saw my own self, shaping my identity. I think when I look back over my life, there were 3 pivotal moments where the enemy he zoned in on our family, right, on my life, and he wanted to wipe us out. And it says in the Bible that the enemy, the devil himself, seeks out throughout the world, right? Seeks out, and he roams throughout the world seeking out who he can devour. And I believe that his eyes were fixed on my family, and the divorce was a huge hit to our family. Once again, not just from the outside world looking in, the Mitchells got a, divorce, our family's fallen apart, but also from believers, the Christians that really turned against my father because it wasn't necessarily the way that God intended it to be. So when people really should have stepped in and loved us, a lot of people turned away and judged. And I don't think that's actually biblical. And I don't think any of us have any right to judge anyone. And so we're fighting for our lives. Honestly, we're fighting for our destinies, each of us individually, my mom, my siblings, my father. It was just the way that it was. But as I grew older, once again, this was establishing the way that I saw family. Like, this is how, I guess this is how family's supposed to be, very dysfunctional. My dad continued to travel the world, telling people about Jesus. He was fighting for other people. He was fighting for his home. My mother, she just really began to, I feel like, dwindle away. She, was, my dad remarried, which is okay, right? Like, he was so young, and he chose to remarry. And there was something in me that felt a loyalty to my mother because I just didn't want another woman in the picture, right? I was like, she's not my mama. I don't want her in my life. And so I really just fought that as a little girl. Like I said, I'm a fighter. And so I fought that. I was like, how can I make her as miserable as possible? Because she's not my mama. And so I was fighting and fighting and fighting. And my dad, I felt, even though he was the best dad in the world, I felt somewhat rejected, right, when a new family came into the picture. And so I really just began to cling to my mother and held on to my mom and her and our relationship. Well, over time and over years, she just started dwindling away, and she started really struggling with anxiety, really high levels of anxiety and depression. And back then, anxiety wasn't really talked about. It was almost viewed as demonic, like you were demon possessed if you had anxiety, which I think that's really crazy. I think it's the reality of the world that we live in. Like, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress. I would believe in, like, let's get to the root, right, of your anxiety, but I wouldn't necessarily label it as demonic. So back in that day, it was like you couldn't talk about anxiety, you couldn't talk about your emotions. Therapy wasn't, God is your counselor, which, yes, that's true, but the same way that God speaks through a preacher, the same way that God speaks through worship leaders and mentors, God speaks through counselors. And so I believe that he is the wonderful counselor, and he manifests himself through people, through counselors. So I don't, I'm a huge, believer in counseling and therapy. So my mom didn't have that outlet. She didn't know who to talk to. So she just more and more bogged down, fighting it, but just pretty much accepting it and wearing anxiety, wearing depression. She became so overwhelmed that she chose to, she had no outlet. She was like, what am I supposed to do? So she goes to the doctor, and they start, prescribing her antidepressants. And one thing turned to the next. And before we knew it, my mom was an addict. And so, addicted to painkillers and antidepressants became her norm. So walking in for us, me, my brother, and my sister, finding her asleep in her food, or, wandering down the streets. She was alive, but she wasn't living. And so another loss in my heart, my family's torn apart. Well, then all of a sudden, my mama, who doesn't need their mama? You never outgrow needing your mother. And so I just watched her. This was my normal. This is the way we operated. We'd come home from school. This was how she was. And so from there, I just, once again, another hit to my life. I was just seeking out love, something that could be consistent, something that could be steadfast in my life, something that could anchor me, something that would just be, I think, be available. Anything that could show me attention, could fill the voids that had formed in my heart. I was just willing to take it on. Obviously, I was in church. I love Jesus so much, and I think that's a big thing that we all need to understand, that you can love Jesus with all of your heart and yet still be broken. Is that the way that he's intended for us to live? No. You know, he is a redeemer. He is a restorer. He is a God that is able to make all things new. But it's also something that almost like the thorn in our side, right? There's always something, I believe, that is before us that causes us to lean into God, that causes us to hunger and thirst for more of God, because we were never intended to do life on our own, right? And so whether you want to call it an attack or whether you want to call it the thorn that was just there because I needed to learn how to lean into God, whatever it is, I needed to learn of this Savior, not just for who other people say that he is, but for who Taylor knows that he is, for myself. And so I began to just seek out affirmation. Like along comes the guy. I'm 14 years old, and like I said, my family had been torn apart. We loved Jesus, but the attack was real. Uh, I'm in this relationship. I get into this relationship, my first boyfriend, and I guess 3 years later, I find myself so immersed in this relationship. He was not, he didn't know Jesus. But for me, it was like, how can I be for someone what I wanted someone to be for me? And now going through counseling, that's what I learned I was doing. I wanted him I wanted to be for him what I had wanted someone to be for me. So I think in that relationship, it was very dysfunctional. It was emotionally abusive. Once again, we were young, but it just is what it is. He was cheating. He would, very degrading, very demeaning. And I would just do what he said because I was so desperate for love. In church, once again, in revivals, serving Jesus, but yet he was temporarily filling voids that I needed to be filled, that only God can fill. But because he temporarily satisfied, it just felt right. I remember the enemy taking scriptures, even in the midst of the abuse and the way he would talk to me and treat me. I remember the enemy taking scripture and twisting it to keep me in the relationship. And I always thought, now that I'm on the other side, how crazy that is, that I was so trapped, even within the word of God. The enemy used scripture, like when Jesus is in the wilderness and he's fasting for 40 days. What did the enemy do? He came and he approached him with scripture. And I think that's what the enemy did to me. He would keep me in that relationship saying, Taylor, love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't keep a record of wrongdoings. And so therefore, I would never leave him. I would show him how much I love him. So therefore I stayed in this relationship to be the Jesus in his life. And yet that's not what God means by that, right? That's a trick of the enemy. And so before I know it, 3 years into this relationship, I know that God has a plan for my life. I know that this is not God's plan for my life, but I'm so trapped. And so I'm like, I need to pack up everything I own and just completely remove myself from this situation. So I do. I pack up everything I own. I plan to move to Dallas, Texas. And all of a sudden, I'm in a car wreck. My car goes in the shop for 2 months. Within that time frame, my dad approaches me and he says, it puts everything on hold, right? I can't move to Dallas because I don't have a car. So my dad approaches me, hey, Taylor, I had a dream that you're pregnant. I want to touch base, and check on you. And I loved it because God always spoke to my father about me through dreams. So you can run as much as you want and you can try to hide as much as you want. But God's grace and his sovereignty, he loves us so much and too much. There's a point where we continue to, run from God and make really, really bad decisions. And I think that that was almost the last straw for me. I think that it was me turning away from God, that final cutoff that, grace was pursuing me and pursuing me and pursuing me and pursuing me, even down to, my father's dreams. And I had an opportunity, like I can choose right now to make the decision to follow Jesus, or I can continue to run. And so I go and take a pregnancy test. I sneak away. I go take a pregnancy test. Take actually 5 at a friend's house, and I am pregnant. I'm 17, pregnant out of wedlock. Now all of a sudden, for me, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, abortion for me was not an option. As much as you know, I love adoption. Adoption wasn't an option for me. I think abortion is a lie from hell itself. However, I do believe that there's people watching that I know have had an abortion. It's just that common. And there's grace for those who are watching who have aborted their babies. I'm grateful that I had an outlet where my family lived out what they preached. They practiced what they preached, and they provided for me a safe space and said, you know what, grace. The baby is not the sin. You have messed up, but we believe that the cross was enough. It is enough, and it will always be enough. And there's grace for you. We believe that God has a plan for this child. I do believe that the enemy, he throws opportunities our ways that are quick fixes, right? Quick fixes. So, for example, you're miserable in your marriage, just get a divorce. It'll fix everything, a quick fix. Um, you don't want this baby, you got pregnant out of wedlock, your family's going to be mad at you. People are going to judge you. You know what? Let's just do a quick fix. Go abort your baby and everything will be okay. Obviously, there's no quick fix in life. Um, it's just the reality. The enemy is a deceiver, and nothing's a quick fix. Still to this day, even though God is a redeemer, I still have to face the divorce, you know, split holidays. And my mom said that if she could do it all over again, she never would have chosen the route of divorce. But the enemy in that moment, it's a quick fix. You're miserable. You've been trying to fight for your marriage. So you know what? Just sign the papers and everything will be okay. Well, no, 25 years later, we still have to figure out how to navigate family and or, you know, step this and sharing holidays. And we still, to this day, are, you know, having to walk out, you know, and encounter divorce in a different way, you know, years later. Same thing with abortion. You know, the enemy wants to tell you it's a quick fix. And yet I have friends that still deal and carry the shame, carry the shame and the guilt and the condemnation. And so from 20 years ago, so there's no quick fix. The reality is you have to face it. But that God, He is our strength and our shield, and He goes before us and He fights our battles. He's our defender. He is every single thing that we need in order to face these situations in our lives. And so for me, abortion wasn't an option. Adoption wasn't an option. I choose to have the baby. And so Christmas Eve of 2005, I go into early labor. I'm 32 weeks pregnant. I go into early labor with my little boy, Micah, and I just remember it being chaos. They take me to the hospital, my sister does, and nurses are coming in, my water breaks, and they're like, you're dilated at a 10, you're about to have this baby. So they rushed me down to emergency C-section. I remember waking up with my mom on my dad on my left and my mom on my right. It was like a white empty room. And next thing I know, I'm like, where's Micah? That's my first question, right? Where's Micah? I want to hold him. He's my baby. I'm excited. You know, over time, I learned how to get excited about it. I wasn't going to live in condemnation. I was like, this baby is a gift from God, even though I messed up. But I believe that God can make it new again. And so I have Micah. Where's Micah? Where is he? And then they tell me that Micah did not survive the birth, that he was stillborn, and that whenever my water broke, he flipped around. He lost oxygen when the umbilical cord wrapped around his little body. And so in that moment, it was another hit to my life. You know, walking through all of the trauma that I had faced in my life, I remember thinking, you know, this is one thing that cannot be stolen from me. This is one thing that no one can take away from me. So my family was destroyed. At a young age, my family was taken away from me, destroyed, loss, right? Suffering. I didn't ask for that, but it happened. Life is sometimes just really unfair. Well, then all of a sudden, my mother, you know, I lost her to addiction, alive but not living, right? So something else that was stolen and taken from me, lost. Well, now I get into a relationship. I'm thinking this can maybe fill the voids. Maybe he'll never leave. I'm not leaving him. You know, I'm going to be here and I'm going to be available to him. I'm going to fight for this. Well, that's taken away. Now all of a sudden my baby. something that's mine, physically mine. I mean, literally in my stomach, I'm growing this baby. No one can take, I'm responsible for this human. No one can take this baby away from me. It's us against the world. Well, now all of a sudden I wake up and it's another loss. And so, dang, I'm going to get emotional. Um, I'm like in the middle of fasting and praying. So, like, emotions. But another loss. So I held him for 18 and a half hours. My little boy, lifeless. So some people find that interesting and maybe weird or unhealthy. But for me, it was just something that marked me forever that I'll never forget. I got to hold him for 18 and a half hours. And I remember holding his lifeless body. He was cold. I can literally go there right now. His little arms and his little legs and his head. And I held him and I didn't want to let go. And I remember in that moment, I think it was not just the moment of, losing Micah, one more loss, but I remember holding him, but I was experiencing the pain of loss from a little girl. So it was not just the loss of Micah, but it was triggering the loss that I had experienced my whole life. Kind of like you just can't control it, right? And I think that's what we have to understand in life. There's just a lot of things that we cannot control. We're not in control of our destiny. We're not in control of, really the things that happen to us. The only thing that we're in control of is our emotions and our choices. And I had made really bad choices, and my choices, even though it was unfair, my choice out of brokenness to that moment. And I think that's a big thing, is making choices out of a place of brokenness is very dangerous, because even, what I wanted when I was broken is not what I want now that I'm whole, right? You see differently. It's like your perspective is distorted. But the closer you draw near to God, you take on his character. So therefore you desire what he desires for you. And I think that was the biggest mistake, is me making these drastic, life-changing decisions out of such a place of brokenness. And so I'm holding Micah, and I remember just praying, I remember my dad literally physically lifted Micah's body up and asked God to raise him from the dead, because we were just shattered. Life is unfair. Life is hard. But in that moment, I was like, once again, the fighter that I am, I was like, you know what, Lord, it's game time. I can either lay here in my sorrow, in my grief. I can play victim. I can choose to stay here, choice, right? And, complain and talk about how unfair life has been. Or I can choose to declare over my life what I've always said about you. I've heard about you. I've read about you in the book, the Bible. I've sang about you on Sunday mornings in revival, Sunday school, that you are a God who is strong. You are a God who is mighty. You are a God who redeems and restores. You are a God who makes all things new. Well, are you really that? Because now it's game time. It's time to walk out what I've always heard about and talked about. And so I just felt the Lord say, Taylor, get up from your pain, get up from your sorrow, get up from your insecurities and worries, get up from your setbacks, and trust that I'm a God who makes all things new. And I promise you, if you give me this, if you give me your life and quit running from me and trying to do things on your own and trying to fill your own voids, and allow me to invade the deepest parts of your soul and make it new, I will blow your mind. And so I laid there for 3 days, and I finally chose, I got to get up. I can't stay here. I cannot stay here. And I promise you, I vowed to God in the hospital room that I would spend the rest of my life telling people what he's done for me. And so I said, whether it's on coffee, over coffee, whether it's on a Zoom call. I didn't even know a Zoom call would be available, whether it's on a stage in front of thousands or, one-on-one conversation. I will spend the rest of my life telling people of the grace that has met me in my mess. I am a absolute mess, but without Jesus, right? But with grace, I believe that you can redeem it. And so it was a process for me. I wish I could tell you that it was overnight, that all of a sudden I got up and I was fighting and I'm good and everything's great. But, it was a journey for me. It was a long journey, years of therapy. I'm still in therapy to this day. I've been in therapy I go to a Christian counselor. I go see her for everything: motherhood, marriage, ministry, all the M's. All the M's, yeah. So I packed up everything once again and I moved to Dallas, Texas, and I began to pursue the call of God on my life. I left everything behind. It was very, very painful. I had to lay a lot down. One thing I always say is that just because it's close to your heart doesn't mean it's God's will for your life.
Mm,
A lot of
mm.
that I had to leave behind that crushed me. Some say I get emotional because I don't think they fully understood me leaving, right? There was a lot of people and friends and just things that I had to leave behind because they could not come into my future, because it was just the way that God had it for my life. In order for me to find Taylor, in order for me to pursue the call of God on my life, I had to leave things behind. And they were close to my heart and so very close. But just because it's close to your heart didn't mean that it was God's will for my life. And so I laid things down and I pursued the call of God. And I slowly began to see God make it new again. As I laid it down one day at a time, God was making it new and he was restoring and he's redeeming. And so I went to Christ for the Nations and I pursued everything, every dream in my heart. I kept fighting, kept grinding, working, and I chose to never go back to Arkansas. And there, Christ for the Nations is where I met my husband, Robert Madu. He was actually speaking when I was sharing my testimony for the very first time. I had never shared my testimony, and he was the guest speaker, and I was sharing my testimony. I mean, just like such a God moment, right? And so we date for 6 years, and I never thought I deserved a guy like Robert, but God brought me, and once again, God does exceedingly above all that, exceedingly abundantly above all that we could think or imagine. And God brought me forward. From there, I talk about the divorce and how dysfunctional it was, but it's awesome because now, if you would have told me 20 years ago that my family would all be together and we would be fine and having, joint holidays. And, the other day, for Thanksgiving last year, my mom and stepmom were in the same room, and we were going to Target. My mom was like, "Hey, can you pick me up some Doritos?" And my stepmom was like, "Yeah, girl." And I was just like, what is happening? Like, we're all in here together. This is so crazy. But just God has a way of redeeming if you keep praying, keep circling. I think, Mark Batterson says something that's so, I think, profound. He says that we write the future with our prayers. And I, for so long, have prayed for restoration over my family. And if you would have told me, like I said, 20 years ago that we would, have the family that we have, is it perfect? Heck no. Are we still dysfunctional? Absolutely. But there's also moments that it's so real, because it's like only the grace of God that we can all be here together. So God, restored. It looks different than what I expected, or my mom and dad necessarily back together. No, but I think restoration sometimes looks differently in God's eyes. We put limitations on what God can do, and so sometimes we have we say, God, this is what we want, this is what we expect, and what's crazy is he answers us, but it looks differently. So that's my prayer always, is God, yes, restore, but restore the way you see it, not the way I see it, because I put you in a box a lot of days, and I put limitations on. And so God did restore my family. But it just looks way different, God brought me Robert. Within Robert, I found such a grace, because I didn't feel like I deserved a man like him, but God brought me him. And I feel like Robert is a snippet of God's grace. From there, for so many years, I longed to have a baby so that I could feel fully healed, right? I felt like I would never fully heal until I had another baby. Um, and, God brought me my Evie girl, and then my little Remy girl and my Najee boy. And I think for so many years, I longed to have a baby. And even though I've had three babies and they brought so much healing to me, I also feel like they never will replace Micah, that Micah is his own, little man. And I remember, this is my favorite part, and then I'm going to close. But for years before children, I would wake up and have really hard days. And I remember one day it was just really hard, and Micah would have been 2. And I was like, God, today is a really hard day, and I just need to know that Micah's okay. Well, what's crazy is I woke up, I go to work, and all of a sudden I open up my computer and I have a MySpace message. So that's how long ago that was. Do y'all remember MySpace? It's like so long ago. And so I have a MySpace message from a friend, and the title is Micah. And so I'm like, what in the world? So I open it up, and it says, I had a dream about Micah last night, and I don't know how I knew it was him. I just knew it was him. And it was him and I in the dream. And he was running and chasing butterflies, and he was laughing so hard. He was so happy. And she said, I remember wishing so badly that you were there with me. And all of a sudden, he grabs her hand. She said, he takes me into this greenhouse where all the valuable flowers were stored. And she said, when I walked into the greenhouse, um, there were pictures of you everywhere. And she said they were hanging from the ceiling. She said they were on the walls, that you were just everywhere. And she said, Micah said that these are pictures of my mommy, and these remind me that one day I get to see her again. And so, in that moment, it was like, once again, we put so many limitations on God. I didn't know how he was going to let me know that Micah was okay, but it was in that moment that I knew Micah was okay. Micah's in heaven. And in that, there's pictures of me everywhere. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I was like, thank you, Jesus. That lets me know I'm going to heaven. So I'm really excited about that. There's pictures of me in heaven. That means I'm going to heaven. Okay. But also, it was like, what? Like, there's pictures of me in heaven? Like,
Wow.
that's insane. But God in his sovereignty, right? He's so big, this massive God that, counts the stars, names the stars. He counts the numbers of hairs on our head. And, he keeps this world going. He knows every concern. He knows every person. He knows every single thing about all of us. And yet he's so detailed to
Mm,
where the pictures of me in heaven for my Micah. And on that day, I needed to know Micah was okay, and that he would send a message through a friend, through a dream. Like, he's so detailed, and he's so fatherly and nurturing, and he cares. And so even in that moment, I always share that because I feel like it brings healing to women who've aborted their babies. They need to know that their baby's okay, and they are okay. Right now, they're okay. And I believe if you're watching, that Micah and your babies are playing together the same way that we're watching together. I believe that they're in heaven watching together, looking down on us, saying, look at our mommies. I think for those who have had stillborn babies and lost a child or miscarried, your baby's okay. But all that to say, I think the key to this is surrender.
mm,
Life I ran, right? I ran and I tried to allow other things to fill the voids in my heart. But it wasn't until I surrendered my life. Surrender doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but surrender sometimes is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. But I promise you that what's on the other side of your surrender, God will blow your mind. And it was through my surrender that I found myself again, that God restored my identity and who I was created to be. I ran. My identity was shattered from a young girl. And I think that's the key to the enemy. He gets us at a young age. If he can get you and shatter your identity from a young age. And I think that's why it's our responsibility as parents, as people, as adults, to guard our babies with everything inside of us. Guard their ears, guard their eyes, guard their hearts, guard their souls, because whatever they're exposed to emotionally, physically, spiritually, the enemy wants to shatter our identities.
wow.
And so therefore, that's one thing
Wow.
that I pray over. And my identity, like I said, was shattered from a young age. And I've spent a lifetime seeking God in different dynamics, aspects to restore my identity. And just real quick, 3 practical, I think, handlebars for me, like I said, was therapy. Christian counseling was something huge to make me go back over my life. I had to walk through it all over again, but we dug down deep and it was dark. There were so many things hidden in the darkness of my soul, and we peeled back the onion, and it got more and more. It smelled, it was bad, it burned, it was hard to peel back those layers. But the further I got back, instead of it being dark and the lies of the enemy, God exposed it. The light came and exposed the darkness, and truth was spoken. What does truth do? Truth sets you free. And so I've been spending my life getting free and more free. So therapy, Christian counseling was massive for me. Also community, godly community. This is why it's so awesome that you, Pastor Twin, are providing a space for women to come, even through a Zoom call. They're able to come and lean in. This is a sisterhood. We lean in on each other, right? When I was too weak to fight for myself, there was a community of people fighting on my behalf. And I believe it's like tear the roof off friends, right? The friend where the friends climbed up the side of a house and dug a hole in the roof of the house, and they lowered him at the feet of Jesus. Those were some good friends, right? So those are friends that are willing to fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. And I had a community of people fighting for my destiny, fighting for my identity, to lower me at the feet of Jesus for God to restore my life again, right? And then it's just you having to seek the word through the word of God and prayer. Like you have to have a spiritual, like for yourself, not someone else. So yes, people are fighting for you, but you have to make the choice to get up and fight for yourself and your own destiny and your own identity. And so fighting for yourself through warring, through prayer and the word of God, community of people, and also through Christian counseling. And I think with those, pursuing the call of God, God will blow your mind. And I am who I am today because of surrender and the help of others. The Church of Jesus Christ is alive more than ever. And God has set me free, and I don't deserve it. I'm a nobody, but through God's grace. And this is a moment for me where, this is what I was fighting for. Another thing is you're never fighting for yourself. You're fighting for those on the other side of your fight. So when you overcome, how many people are going to overcome because you overcame? And sometimes we don't see ourselves worthy of fighting, right? I'm not worthy. I don't need to be. Sometimes with suicidal thoughts, I'm not worthy of living. You fight, because when if you realize, do you realize how many people have found freedom underneath the sound of my testimony because of God's grace? So how many people, the enemy knew that, but I've been fighting. I'm going to keep fighting, because the reality is the war isn't over. You will be fighting for the rest of your life. There's been so many attacks that have come my way, but once again, what was established inside of me in the fight as a little girl, what was the strength of God that was established in me? So nothing was wasted. That's the thing, is God doesn't waste a thing. So even though I was fighting, even though it was hardships and it was suffering, what God was developing inside of me actually will sustain me for the rest of my life. And so anyways, I'll stop talking because I know that I keep talking, and I keep talking.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if you have questions for me.
I have loads of questions. Pastor Taylor, that is amazing. Wow. I got emotional when you got emotional. Like, wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for pouring out your heart. Thank you for just being real and vulnerable. And I'm just going to quickly go into the questions. So someone said, I've gone through a similar experience, did so many things I'm not proud of, but I found God and became a Christian. How do I overcome guilt and not being defined by my past?
Well, you know what, Stay, I keep before me, because guilt is so real. Shame is so real. But shame is a tool that the enemy uses to keep us, I think, keep us bound, to keep us not running in the full potential and the fullness and the freedom of what God has for us. And I think this is what God spoke to me years ago. He said, Taylor, when you choose to carry shame and you choose to walk forward with shame, carrying it, right? We carry it, we latch arms with it. It attaches itself to us with bad decisions or, whatever. It's what the enemy attaches itself with. So it's one of his greatest weapons. Shame, I'm attached. When you choose to carry that, what you're saying is the cross wasn't enough. The cross wasn't enough. What I did was not enough. Do you believe that the cross was enough? Do you believe in the blood of Jesus? I'm like, absolutely. That's what I preach. That's what I live out. I believe the cross was enough. When you receive shame, you say the cross wasn't enough. When you release shame, then you say that my grace is sufficient and the cross was, is, and will always be enough. And it was in that moment that I realized when I take on shame and I carry it with me in my future, I'm saying the cross wasn't enough, but I know the cross was enough. So I choose today to lay it down, even though I don't deserve it. I don't deserve grace. I don't deserve to live the life that I lived, but that's the cross. Jesus went to the cross. He died. He shed his blood. He bore our burdens. He bore our shame so that we could live in the fullness of God. So when I choose to receive shame and carry it into my future, I'm saying the cross wasn't enough. And that's a lie, and I don't believe it. So today I receive the cross, the finished work of Jesus Christ. So therefore, I lay shame down. And so that's what I encourage you to do today. It's keeping that in your mind. We don't realize when we accept shame that that's actually what we're saying. But we believe this word right here, this word, this is grace. This is what says we can lay shame down and we don't have to carry it anymore. So if you believe that, then you don't have to carry it any longer. So shame off of you in the name of Jesus. I speak truth. I speak redemption. And I pray that God invades those parts of your soul that makes you, stay where you are and makes you believe that you have to carry shame into your future. You don't have to carry shame into your future because the cross was enough.
Hallelujah. Amen. The cross was enough. Amen. Thank you for that. Was enough. Now, I like this question because it's related to when you said the devil was almost making scriptures, like almost using scriptures against you to keep you in that relationship. And the person said, how do you distinguish between the voice of God and Satan?
I think that's so good. That's a common question that I actually get. I think for me, here's the reality is I think back in that time, I was so broken as well as immature. So it was my maturity level and my brokenness combined. But if I'm honest, even though I was broken and I was immature, there was a deep, deep, deep voice down inside of me, which was the Holy Spirit. I think it was the prayers of my father. I think it was the Holy Spirit revealing to me and fighting for me. I always knew deep down inside that I was wrong. I knew deep down inside that I was not supposed to be in that relationship. I think the enemy would come and say, love is patient, love is kind, fight for this. But also, while I was believing that and trying to do that, I also deep down inside knew I was not supposed to be in the relationship. And I think that's the reality. We can say all day long that, it's hard for us to tell, but I think there's always that gut check deep down inside that's the Holy Spirit that's telling us that we're not supposed to be. And I think it's more so taking a step outside of the situation and seeing how does this, say if it's a relationship, how does this relationship benefit me? This relationship right now has pulled me away from all of the people that love me the most. Is that healthy? No. Now I'm out of church because I'm sexually active and I don't want to be a hypocrite. So now I'm out of church because I'm sexually active and I'm in this relationship. So is that healthy? No. I can go down the list. I now have become a person that I'm not supposed to be. I find myself lying. I find myself sneaking around, all for this relationship. Is that healthy? No. So really, if you really take a step outside of your emotions and you take a step out of your brokenness and just logically think, even take spiritual out, I'm not the person that I know I'm supposed to be. I know I'm not supposed to lie. I know I'm supposed to be in church. I know I'm not supposed to be sneaking around. So therefore, I know I'm not supposed to be in this relationship. But I think, when you're seeking God for your life, God is going to reveal it to you, whether it's a gut check or whether it's revealing it through someone else, through a prophetic word. God is going to speak to you and he's not going to confuse you. So even though I was pursuing this I was pursuing this relationship, I also was praying, God, please help me, please help me, please help me. And he was helping me. He was making me miserable until I surrendered. You see? So I think it's just, while there's no, I think, blanket answer for that, how do you determine truth, God's truth? I think you align yourself with God's truth as well. And if you align yourself with God's word and truth, you'll always see if your situation either, goes with the word of God or goes against the word of God. And if it goes against the word of God, then that's the enemy.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now let's talk about the relationship between you have with both your father and your mother, because going through divorce, and like you said in your case, you guys were used like a ping pong. So it was mother says, hate father, maybe father says, but today it seems like you have a relationship with both your father and your mother. How were you able to develop that in the midst of everything that happened?
Well, so here's the deal. I think for me, I have a little baby picking it. Say hello. Oh, on the Zoom call. I think for me, I think because I have been in seasons of brokenness, the older that I've gotten, I just realized we all need grace. Because I think that's why God's grace is so big, because if you hear it from everyone's perspective, you're always going to lean in and start to understand why they did what they did. So like you hear my perspective and it's like, oh, of course you went and got pregnant out of wedlock because look at your upbringing. But if you heard my mom's perspective, you would hear what caused her to choose addiction. If you heard my dad's side, you would hear why, you know, why this situation played out the way that it did, because God's so big. He sees above all of us. He sees the things that happen to us and the trauma that we've all faced. And so for me, the same grace that I long to receive is the same grace that I want to extend. And so although my parents weren't perfect, and there's things that I could look back over my life and say, you probably could have done that better. I'm sure my kids will say the same thing about me. There's a lot of times where I make mistakes and I don't parent the best way. And I pray that my kids will give me grace. I've prayed for my mom's redemption and her freedom for years and years and years and years. So why would I pray for her freedom and then all of a sudden, not show her grace? I do have to have boundaries, because I have walls up at times because I don't want to be hurt again. My dad, once again, he's, oh my gosh, can we go get donuts?
Hi, Evie.
I really want donuts. You gotta wait, okay? Go find Daddy and ask Daddy. He's in your room, okay? Go find Daddy and ask Daddy. Sorry. Mom life. There you go, baby. Go ask Daddy.
We understand.
So, I think for my mom and dad, I'm like, how would Jesus, respond, and how would he treat them and handle them? So, I think at the end of the day, like my dad's phenomenal. I think I am who I am today because my dad fought on my behalf. And so I love my dad and honor my dad, and my mom. I love her so much. I'll never outgrow needing my mom. Has she had some major challenges in her life? Yes. But once again, the same grace that I want to receive is the same grace that I feel like I have a responsibility to extend. And so I just kind of trust God day to day. At the end of the day, everyone's going to disappoint you in life. That's one thing I've learned in my 33 years of living. Every person is going to disappoint you. Once again, pastors, preachers, parents, I don't know why people put us on a pedestal, like, because at the end of the day, we're human. And if you got into the details of our lives, you'd probably be disappointed. And so we all need grace. We all need Jesus. And I think that everyone's going to disappoint you. I'm going to disappoint people. But Jesus Christ has to be your anchor. So I've come to the place where Jesus is my anchor. Everyone else just kind of comes second, because you're going to fail me. You're going to disappoint me. But if Christ is my anchor, I feel like I can see through the lens the lens of his eyes, right? And the way he sees things. So I see people differently. I see situations differently. And I think that would just be called grace, So I don't know if that helps or that even answers the question, but that's just kind of how I see it,
That is powerful. Thank you. Now, this person says, I've always felt wired different, but I've not discovered what it is God will have me do. And right now, when I see colleagues in the same generation doing great things, I feel sad, weighed down, and lost. How do I really handle identity crisis and the highs and lows? So the person, feels that they're different, but is still in that phase of discovery. But then it seems like life is moving on and other people are doing great things. So he or she feels there's a crisis of identity.
Well, there's I could answer that a few ways. So I think one, there's only one you. There's only one you. There's not another Taylor Madu.
Mm,
God has a plan specifically for my life. He has
mm,
a call specifically for my life. There's only one Pastor Toyin.
mm,
Um, it's your lane, right? We're all in our lanes. That's my prayer and that's my heartbeat, is that we all understand the lane that we are in. There's a specific lane, one fingerprint. You have your fingerprint. I have my fingerprint. And God doesn't expect you to be like anyone else. So we're all running in different lanes, but God's grace, we're running in the same direction, and that direction is Jesus, right?
wow.
What is causing, the confusion in your identity? What is causing you to feel? Is it by looking at other people's successes? Is that via social media? Via social media is as amazing as it is, it's honestly a joke. So people will say, "Oh, you're so patient with your babies." Like, "Oh my gosh, how do you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna like put on social media like me screaming at my kids. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna naturally get my phone out and be like, ah, and scream at my kids and then put that on social media." So if you're comparing your life to other people's successes via social media, internet, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever you're looking at, even me right now, "Oh, you're so sweet. You're telling your daughter, like, you're being patient and saying, like, we'll get donuts in a second." Well, normally I'd probably scream at her, "Get out of here. I'm out." But it's like, I'm not going to do that. Do you know what I mean? So I think if you're comparing yourself and your life to what you see on the internet, well, that's a lie. It's not. Yes, I am. I love Jesus, but I'm also not going to put out every time I scream, every time I make cuss. I mean, yeah, it's like, it's the reality. Like, I love Jesus, but I'm a mess without Jesus. And if I'm not in the word, or if I'm praying or drawing near to God, trust me, I'm not, I'm a different person. And so I think we compare our lives to this false perception of what we think is defined as success. And I
Mm,
think success is embracing who you are and running with that call with everything inside of you. I think for myself too, like, my husband is one of the most brilliant speakers you've ever heard in your life. If I compared my communication skills to my husband, then I would never open my mouth, because my husband
mm.
brilliant. Half of the time he talks, I'm looking up words in the dictionary because I'm like, what? What's that mean? Like, I don't even know what you're saying because it's like another language. I'm like, wow, you're smart. But I've learned I am who I am. I'm Taylor. I'm the Southern bumpkin from El Dorado, Arkansas, and I'm gonna be, what you see is what you get. So if I try to compare the way I sound to my husband, once again, I'd put myself in a box. I'd limit myself, and then I would crumble because I would feel not good enough and inadequate and insecure. But I'm coming to the knowledge of, like, at the end of the day, people are going to love you. People are going to hate you no matter what you do in life. So I don't define my success by other people's successes. I'm seeking God to say, "God, what is your will for my life? What do you want me
Mm,
to do? What does my lane look like?" And that is where I find my affirmation from. Once again, if it's public success and big followers, well, that's going to fail you, because Robert and I both have haters. We have people that talk about us. We have people that don't like us. Then we have people that love us, sing our praises. And it's like, if you're defining your success by what other people say, then you're going to spend the rest of your life fighting, and it's a false fulfillment. So it's finding what God has
mm,
for you and allowing him to define what success is. Success to me is someone who's secretly tucked away behind closed doors, who's seeking God, who's praying and going to bat for other people, that will never be applauded by man, that literally is, how many people, my family is saved because of a man who was a grocery sacker at the local Piggly Wiggly grocery store. My dad would go in, he carried his pocketbook. He was a pastor of about 20 people. And then on the side, he didn't make enough money pastoring, so he would sack groceries at the grocery store, and that's how he made his money. He would visit hospitals and carry around a pocket Bible and visit hospitals just to tell people about Jesus on the weekdays when he wasn't working or pastoring. He would walk in, he walked into the room with my dad as a 17-year-old man who had just been in an accident. He led him to Jesus in the hospital room. My dad gets up and he goes, all of a sudden he was Lutheran, did not know Jesus. No one in my family was saved. My dad is led to Jesus by this grocery sacker who came to visit him in the hospital room. No one ever knew his name. My dad is so passionate and in love with Jesus. Now he spent 37 years traveling the globe telling people about Jesus. Now all of a sudden his daughter, his family lives for Jesus. Now all of a sudden I'm married to my husband. We travel the globe. It continues, right? The grace of God continues. We're now all serving Jesus. And this is powerful. So the day that his name is Brother Jake Snyder. So he passed away, okay? And my dad was standing at his funeral, at his casket. And while he's standing there looking over his casket at his funeral, another man walks up who's really old. He puts his arm around my dad. My dad said, as Brother Jake was lying in his casket, all of a sudden he looks down and there's that pocket Bible. That same pocket Bible that Brother Jake Snyder led my dad to the Lord with was actually lying on his chest 30 plus years later, 40 plus years later. Isn't that crazy? The man walks up beside him and he literally puts his arm around my dad. My dad says, hi, I'm Robbie. And he goes, I know who you are. He said, Brother Jake told me about you the day he led you to the Lord. And my dad was like,
wow.
tears, right? And he goes, I'm actually the man who led Brother Jake to the Lord. And all of a sudden, it's like a full circle moment. And he goes, the day that he led you to Jesus, he said he called me and was excited. And he said, hey, I caught a big fish today. And so literally caught a big fish today. Like, what? That is so powerful. And little did he know that my dad, laying in that hospital bed, would spend 37 years of ministry as soon as he got saved, traveling the globe, telling people about Jesus. Do you know how many fish that have been caught in the nets of my dad preaching Jesus? And now my life and globe, once again, because of Brother Jake, I'm able to be in Nigeria on a Zoom call, catching fish. And so it's like, don't ever underestimate the power of your call. And it may not look like the way that you expect it, right? We define success as everyone knows your name. You're going to be on this Zoom call and that Zoom. What if it's just being at a grocery store, sacking groceries, and one person comes through the line and all of a sudden you say, hey, do you know Jesus? Jesus has changed my life. Like, that is what the gospel is. And so don't allow other people's success or, what you see as success to define what success truly is. Because I believe that only heaven is going to tell of what true success is, kingdom success. So that's my answer to that.
Wow. Pastor Taylor. Wow. That was intense. Like, literally. Wow. Okay. Wow. That was intense. Wow, thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question because we're even out of time, but I just want to, wow, that was intense. And this person says, can I even find the question? There's so many questions. I think we're going to be having you every other time. There are many questions on all sorts of things, there are many questions, but I'm just going to ask one more question. What does actual surrender look like? The person said, was it an aha moment or was it a place you finally decided to get to?
Well, for me, the moment of surrender was for so many years, I found myself picking up things to fill the voids in my heart. So I think I didn't even realize how broken I was, right? Sometimes we don't even realize how broken we are. It's just kind of what the dysfunction is our normal, and we just operate from a dysfunction because it's what we've always known. And so I get into the relationship, not really thinking anything about it. But through time, I realized I was seeking out other things to fill the brokenness, right? So after 3 years of fighting for my destiny, once I got pregnant and once I lost Micah and I was laying in the hospital bed, I realized it was almost like the Holy Spirit spoke to me. It was tangible. I felt him with me. And it was like, you trying to seek out other places, other things, other people to fill the voids in your heart. It will continue to cause more and more voids in your heart and leave you empty and broken. So you made decisions, look at your decisions, bad choices out of brokenness. You're running from my call. You have a decision right now to choose me. So see where your choices have gotten you. You're laying in a bed right now holding your lifeless baby, and you're broken, you're shattered. The father of your child is not in the picture, he's gone. So look what your choices, look where you're at. So you can choose to continue to try to do things on your own, or you can choose to surrender your brokenness, your voids, your bad decisions, your insecurities, your shame and your guilt, and everything that has attached itself to your life, your identity. You can choose to surrender it, and it's not going to be an easy road. That's what I want you to understand, that just because you say yes to Jesus doesn't mean that everything's going to be easy. The attack is going to increase because the devil knows what's on the other side of your surrender. And so in that moment, I would say it's a lifetime of surrender. It's not a one-time decision to surrender. I have literally spent the rest of my life. So ever since that day I surrendered every single day. And I surrender moments of every single day. God, this is a moment that I have to give to you because I can't do this. And if I do it, I'm going to mess this up. And so for me, it was like, I found myself taking 5 steps forward. Okay, I'm good. Surrender. But then it would get hard. Oh, I'd go back, 5 steps back. Then all of a sudden, 10 steps forward, 2 steps back. But it was a year. It was year after year after year, day after day after day of choosing to surrender. So you will spend the rest of your life choosing to surrender to God.
Pastor Taylor, like, you are amazing.
Thank you.
We've come to the end of this session. You just made me so emotional. Thank you. I must tell you guys that I do not know Pastor Taylor from Adam. I listened to a message she preached 3 Sundays ago, I think, and I slid into her DM. Like, that's literally how this happened.
I love that.
And I slid into her DM.
It's the best.
Yeah, and then I went to her website and sent her a message, and chasing, we're finally here. So I don't even know her, but you have been such a blessing. This session is such a blessing. I'm seeing everybody's comments. You've blessed their lives, you touched their lives, and I know that you've shifted something in the minds of everyone that is listening. If I didn't mention, and just in case you don't know, Pastor Robert is Nigerian. He is one of us. So literally, Pastor Taylor is back home with us in Nigeria. Pastor Robert Madu is full Nigerian. So she's our sister. Evo. Thank you, Pastor Taylor. Yes, he's Evo. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of this session. Guys, remember that we still have the men's panel, but that is back on YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel, The Covenant Nation, Facebook, Instagram. Amazing session, men's panel coming up. Thank you, Pastor Taylor. Well, we have to go now.